Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I am thrilled today to have Mr. Andrew Namanny here with me. He's the founder and host of the Permission to Shine podcast, and I love this podcast. We were just talking about this because I love the stories that he pulls out of all of his guests and what he really gets to dig into. So, Andrew, just thank you for joining me and hopping on here.
Danielle, thank you so much for having me. We're gonna have some fun today. I've got a
Yes.
good feeling about it.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm excited to hop into all of it, especially the side of you that was in Medtech sales. And you were the youngest manager from everything that my research nerd of me was reading about you. I want to hop into your learning in the sense of you wanted to help people. You wanted to be in a space where you could make a difference and help as many people as you possibly could. What kind of got you into that sense of wanting to help people and doing the most that you possibly could?
I think that it draws back to South Africa for me,
Okay.
right? I'll back up. So when I was 14 years old, I got access to a couple $100, which was a lot of money for me at the time. And I instantly put it into the stock market. I signed up on TD Ameritrade and I put it into Apple. And so this was probably like
Were you
20,
were you young? Were you the 2009 person?
super young. Exactly. And so I put all the money I have in Apple stock and I see it skyrocket. And I'm like, man, I just made some good money. I'm like, I'm going to go do this for my career. And so I'm 13, 14 years old thinking that I've got it all figured out and that this is what I'm going to do for life, you know? And lo and behold, it didn't go that way, right? I started doing finance and learned that it wasn't really for me. I
Yeah,
didn't I didn't get to help people.
yeah.
And so I was close to graduating, Danielle, and I was like, well, crap, there goes that plan.
Yep.
And so what do, right? When did you know what you were gonna do? Did you have it all figured out or?
God, no. I was actually before I went into college, I was gonna go to pastry school. Like I was
Huh,
legitimately going to go and open my own bakery and do all that stuff.
I love that.
Didn't
That
end
is the
up that.
that is the way into so many people's hearts.
I used to make cakes. I was like, I used to draw cakes. I was like, I'm going to make wedding cakes. Like Cake Boss was my thing.
Oh, God bless you.
And I was like, woo.
You
And
need to
then
teach me.
it was my dad. He's like, go to school, get your business degree. He's like, you get your business degree. He's like, you can go do anything you want to do.
That's true.
And so I went and got my business degree in marketing, and I was like, not going and opening my own pastry shop.
Yeah. Well, life takes crazy turns, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I was. I realized I wasn't going to go into finance. And so I looked at my roommate at the time and I said, man, I'm screwed. I'm about to graduate. This bank is calling me saying, hey, we need to know by the end of the day, are you coming with us? You know, it was an amazing offer. They said you could have any position I wanted. And I was like, in my gut, that's when I learned to just trust my gut, I
Yeah.
think. And I was like, I can't do it. And I want to go teach in a different country. I grew up in Iowa, right? And so I was like, I want to go get exposed to some different cultures. And so I looked at my roommate, he's also named Andrew, and I said, will you go to South Africa with me and teach for a summer? And he's like, dude, I'm supposed to be graduating then. So he literally missed his graduation. Him and I pack up our bags and we go to South Africa for a summer, Danielle, and we taught in some really rough areas. And what it showed me is we had a really cool opportunity to impact 20 kids that summer,
Yep.
right? And kind of show them what's possible, give them some tools to
Yeah.
get out of their current situation. So, but I don't want to stop there.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to just help 20 kids. I want to help 20 million people.
Yeah.
And how can I do that? And that's when MedTech came into the picture.
And you fully went into it. And at first, I loved the story that I was reading that you were sharing about the transition you were making from Medtronic to podcasting. But what I loved was you at first did not get the job you went for. Like you were rejected, but you were relentless in going after this job. Why were you so hell bent on getting in and doing stuff with MedTech and Medtronic?
Yeah. You've been your research. I like that. Thank you.
I
And that's always fun. And for me, again, it was trusting my intuition and it was just a calling. And so I knew I wanted medical devices because one, you could help people in a really
Love
scalable
it.
way. Two, it was going to be something that's around for 40 years, where I was like, hey, if I have a 40-year career ahead of me, what's something that's going to evolve and not be
Yeah.
replaced by AI and all these things are going to come up? And the third thing I needed, Danielle, was a challenge, right? I'm the Aries type. I need a challenge to keep
You're
me,
my sister. My sister's an Aries too.
you know, our type then.
Oh, I do. I
And
do.
so those three things led me to MedTech. And I said, okay, well, who's doing it at the highest level? Who has the coolest products with the best people? You know, I think I'm somebody who's very intentional, surrounding myself with really just like smart, kind, hardworking people, and emphasis on the kindness. And so I started talking to all of these different companies,
Love it.
and they were very different. But what stood out about Medtronic to me is that it was diverse. They had the best products, and they were kind of a meritocracy, right? Like who can do the best job, and that's who we're going to hire. Not just because you're some good-looking white tall dude, you
Right.
know, and then just hire that. No, they wanted really good people, and that was why I wanted to go with Medtronic.
And you were in it. You were the youngest, one of the youngest managers they'd have at that company. And then we get into this transition and this movement away from med tech sales into the beautiful world of podcasting and storytelling in this venue. Can you share? You've been very open about this story too. Can you share what kind of clicked and said, I want to go do this? Like, this is what's calling me now. What was that transition like?
Yeah, so I was extremely happy at Medtronic. Kind of like you said, like I'd gotten rejected when I was trying to get in. It took
Yeah.
me multiple tries to get in. So once I was in, I was like, I'm here, you
Yeah.
know. And I'd gotten lucky to get 4 promotions with them, lived in 4 cities, and was in that sales manager position. I was selling a device that used artificial intelligence to detect colon cancer in real time. It was the first of its kind, and to me, it was fascinating. Like
Yeah.
it was like the coolest product in the world, and I felt really lucky to work on it at hospitals like Stanford, Northwestern,
Oh,
Harvard, and so really all over the country. And what what happened though is I was at a board meeting for a nonprofit that I'm on. It's based out of Nepal. It's called the Z Foundation, DZI. They basically help build schools and farms in the most rural parts of Nepal,
okay.
like crazy places.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm at the first board meeting, and I'm looking around the room, and I said, this might be the most impressive room I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
But everyone was so humble.
Yeah.
And I was so inspired by it. And I sparked up a conversation with the guy next to me, a man named Brent Bishop.
Yep.
And Brent and I start getting him warmed up and cracking him open like I love to do, and building trust with him. And eventually he's like, tells me this story about how he was going to summit Mount Everest.
Yeah.
So it's $75,000 to do that. It's 2 months of your life. And he's nearing the summit. It's summit day. He comes across a stranger, complete stranger, who's all alone and dying. And Brent has to make a decision. Does he try to ignore that and continue on his journey, right? His goal that he's been obsessed with for his whole life? Or does he surrender it all and save the stranger's life, right? And what did
Yeah.
he do? He did the latter. He saved the stranger's life,
Yep.
gave up his summit. And I said, Brent, we need to share this. I was like, this is one of the most inspiring things
Yeah.
I've ever heard. And he said, Andrew, no way. He's like, I'm not that type. I'm not going to share it. And that's when it clicked for me. I was
Yeah.
like, I want to share the inspiring stories from people who aren't out there sharing it already, from the
Yeah.
humble people.
Yep.
And that's why I call it permission to shine.
I love that. And I want to hone in on the humble stories because that's like a main tagline and how you describe this podcast. In your mind, the people you've had on today, what categorizes people as those inspiring humble stories to you? Like what catches your eye about these people before you even have them on?
Yeah. I'm just a sucker for a really good story. You know, like, do you listen to podcasts?
All the time.
You know, we're fortunate. You've talked to over 100 people on your show, right? You've probably gotten to meet some of the most incredible people. And what inspires me is people like Eric Weinmeier. He was the first and only blind person to climb Mount Everest.
Yep.
It's these people who've been through so much trauma and bullshit, but have the most optimistic mindsets, and people who are just getting things done.
Yep.
You know, one of my very first guests was a man named Jay Adair. He started at a company called Copart when he was like 19 years old. and he grew it. I mean, he was one of the first employees. He took it over and grew it to a 9,000 person company. They're worth $55 billion. The man had never done a podcast before.
Wow.
And so it's just these extraordinary people who I think have these amazing lessons and these amazing stories,
Yeah.
and they're not being told and they're not being captured. And so it's my mission to get those on the record, share them, and hopefully inspire other people to live a better life.
I was listening when this is coming out, and this episode will, Jose Pereira, who's the Sitco CEO, I was listening to this new episode yesterday, and oh my God, like he hadn't had a shower in 5 years. And I was sitting here, I was like, what in the world? I was like, how? I was like, this is incredible to listen to. And I think you even hit on it too. A CEO of a gas station that's right down the road from me. Like it, you see Citgos everywhere. So it was amazing that it's some of the craziest fucking stories sometimes that I've heard that you have with your guests. Like it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and again, Jose, like what an inspiration. I mean, he's not sitting there being like this victim mindset of like, boo-hoo me. I was held hostage in Venezuela for 5 years, lost 120 pounds. He's like, life is good. God is good. Nothing is impossible. There's so much opportunity.
Yes.
And there's nothing more inspiring than that.
I was like, holy shit. I
Can
was
you
like, what
imagine?
am
I mean,
I
he like,
doing?
yeah, the guy's like flying around on private jets and like living a good life. He's a humble man, and then yeah, went for his last business meeting ever after a 35-year career. It was his last business meeting he was ever going to do on the road. And America just put a bunch of sanctions against Venezuela. Venezuela wasn't happy, and they happened to have some American executives in town, including Jose, and they snatched him up, accused him of being American spies.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I want to hop back to the boardroom that you were sitting in, and you were sitting around, you were like, this might be the most fascinating room. I find myself when I'm at conferences and things like that, like there's a sense of energy that you suddenly get where you're looking around going, I I can't believe that I'm sitting here in this room right now talking to, or just being in the presence of these people or in hearing these stories. Have you had any of those moments yet where you're like, I'm really getting to sit down with this person, or I'm really getting to be in this room?
Every day of my life. I'm like, how the hell did I end up here? And that's why my friends are always like, what is Andrew doing now? Like, what has he gotten himself into? And it's especially living in LA, right? Like things happen all the time. It's you get invited to something and then you're like, wait, you ran Burberry for 10 years. Oh my gosh. And we're sitting in your living room right now, or but it's always random. Like I did my first berries class like a year ago.
Okay.
Berries, it's like berries boot
Yes.
camp. It's a big fit,
Yes.
right? Super trendy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So- and it's where I go to find cute girls. And
There you go. You know where to go.
yeah, I know where to go. And so I was at Barry, my first class ever. And afterwards, I sparked up a conversation with the guy that was next to me. And he was like super jacked. And I was like, dude, like you've been coming for a while. And he's like, yeah, a long time. And we talked for 20 minutes, Danielle. And at the end of it, he asked me what I do. And I kind of explained to him that I was in Medtech and all this. And then I was like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, like I work for Barry's. And I was like, okay, what do you do? And he's like, I just kind of like help out. He was the CEO of Barry's. And he wasn't going to tell me. And so he's become a friend and somebody I've gone to Barry's with. And then I just got back from New York last night, and that's who I was in New York City with. We were taking Barry's classes together. We did a podcast together.
Wow.
And I just feel so lucky because he's such a humble man.
I love that. I always say too, I'm like, I'm the type of person, I'm like, I try to be the nicest person I possibly can to customer service people, to everyone that I possibly can. I was like, you have no idea how small the world is until it comes around and you meet somebody in a gym class or meet somebody. I'm like, you have no idea the impact that that person can have on your life later down the road. I'm like, you be nice and you be kind to everybody that you possibly can, because I'm like, you never know who you're going to meet or who they know and can point you to.
Amen. Never burn a bridge. And I
No.
think I want to add one more thing to that question because Nepal, right? I've hit on that. And it's a country I've fallen in love with. I was just there in March. in the
Yeah.
villages. And probably the person who's inspired me the most, and like the person that I'm like, how did I end up in this
Yeah.
situation? You know, like, wow, I'm so lucky. Is our dog Shirai. He's 19. He's an orphan. He's living in his uncle's place. It's a 15-hour Jeep ride from the next city, like a really rough Jeep ride. And he has a dream of being a rapper. And so the guy's literally writing music and producing music on his cell phone. Like
No.
very few people have a cell phone. There's no internet out there. And he's like making it happen. And I was just walking by his house and like needed some water. We're out in the middle of nowhere, like literally nowhere. And he took me in and like we hung out for like 2, 3 hours and I'll never forget him. He really special guy. And I can't wait to see his rap career do something.
That's so cool. I want to get into, you kicked this podcast off, Permission to Shine, and you fully went into it. What was the first thing you did when you were like, I'm going full into podcasting and I'm going to kick this off? Was it you found a studio space? Like, what was your thing?
Well, when I left my job to do this, I said, there's a lot of things there. It was scale it up, right? It's okay. I'm doing 2 a month right now. I need to do more. I've done 34 episodes, and I'm like, how do I get to 100 episodes
Yeah.
as quickly as is humanly possible?
Yeah.
So I started doing 4 a month, and it's making sure I have people to help me too,
Yeah.
right? And so it was like building out a good team because I'm not good at like editing. We do, I mean, all of mine are in like
Yeah.
a studio with video and they're really out produced out and whatever. And so it was like finding a good team, scaling to
Yeah.
4 a month, and then making sure that I had a guest pipeline. Because when somebody takes an hour of their precious time to listen to an episode, like I value that
Yeah.
so much. And
Yes.
so I want to make sure that I am bringing one of the best stories they've ever heard. And so I have to say no to a lot of people who want to come on the show and protect that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just keeping a high guest caliber and making sure that there's content out there.
A lot of people immediately go into when you think about podcasting and people who don't have their own or have never kind of gotten a behind the scenes look immediately go into like the producing, the editing and everything. And I'm like, the hardest thing that a podcast host probably has to deal with is the guest pipeline in terms of you have a certain image for your podcast and like you were talking about high caliber for Permission to Shine. You have to go out and you have to put yourself out there. You have to write pitches. You have to try to coordinate with everybody. Like that is the hardest part that I have seen as part of this podcast. I'm like, I can do editing all day long, but I'm like making sure you have that guest pipeline and making sure, okay, I have 52 episodes every single year. Like that's not an easy task to do.
Yeah. Well, I think we should team up because now the guest pipeline for me is like the easiest part because
Okay.
that was my first tap, like because that was my first like get this shit done. And
Yeah.
the editing and all that terrifies me. It's
Um,
like
we'll
it's
switch
the
places.
worst. But the guest pipeline for me now is great. I mean, I've got like 10 episodes already recorded right now, ready
Wow.
to go.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I made sure that my first guest had the best podcast experience they've ever had. That's what I do. I'm like, how
Yeah.
do I blow the experiences they've had out of the
Yeah.
water? And then I've never had to do a cold email or anything. It's just all of my previous guests introducing me to the next.
Wow.
I'm super fortunate.
I am jealous. I am jealous right now of that.
And how many episodes have you done now?
You'll be 111 came out Wednesday.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's huge. That's so many episodes.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so this year is the first year that I'm committing to like 52 episodes.
Let's go.
And I'm like, this is a lot.
When did you start it?
20, I think 2020.
Dang.
So
Good
this is
for
my fifth
you.
season. This is my fifth season doing this.
Wow. That's amazing, Danielle.
And I'm like, I did a live episode for episode 100. And now I'm like, okay, how can I go do more of
Did
that?
you like the live?
I did with a live audience. Like, it was super cool. So now I'm like, how do I go do more live stuff? Because I'm like, now that's interesting to me.
I agree.
In your experience with MedTech and sales influence, how does any of it influence how you do podcasting, how you approach podcasting? Any of the how you your storytelling and interview questions.
Definitely. It was funny. I had a guy who was giving me a sales pitch this morning on the phone. Good guy. But he talked probably for 80% of it. And I think if you're doing a sales pitch and you're the salesperson, you should be talking 20% of
Yeah.
the time.
Yep.
And that's what I learned at Medtronic, right? Is I had to pitch CEOs of major hospitals and chief surgeons and chief physicians. So
Yep.
you got to come with your A game. And if you're talking 80% of the time, you're probably doing a really bad job. And same with podcast hosting, right? Is I don't want to be talking most of the time. I think a Larry King approach. I don't want to be using the word I want it very much so to be about my guest,
Okay.
just as it would be in a sales pitch.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really carried me in my ability to listen like intently, like really listen and not be thinking about what I'm going to say next, but actually what is this person saying? And the final thing I'd say there is just the ability to build trust,
Yeah.
right? I think over 80% of my guests say no to doing my podcast at first. And I have to build trust with them and
Yeah.
convince them to do it. And those were all things that allowed me, to kind of do what I did in medtech.
I love that. Something I've struggled with in the sense of when you're doing an episode, sitting and actually not thinking about the next question you're going to ask, not thinking about really focusing on what you are saying at that current moment. And it's a struggle. Has there been things that you have had to kind of say, Andrew, whether it's talking with your hands or nervous taps or something like that, when you're doing your recordings, has there been something where you're like, okay, I need to work on this or this?
For me, it's body language and
Ooh,
always trying to, I could see my hands start to close up,
yeah.
and so I always just try to really embrace the armrest
Okay.
and just like kind of glue my arms to that. If I'm talking with my hands, that's great. But if they're resting, keep them separated, keep them there, make sure that my legs aren't crossed, and
Yep.
have a really open body language because that kind of invites the guest in. And I also think since mine are on video, like the listener, right? Like for the listener, you want to show that you're having this like engaged conversation and that even though I might be nervous, as I could be with a lot of guests, I don't want to show that.
When I ever am in person, I'm like, I need to not cross my arms. I'm like,
Yes.
I've been in college classes and my professors are like, you look like you're angry just from your body language because you're
Uh,
crossing your arms. I'm like, oh, sorry. I'm like, I just naturally go to those states of putting our arms there or clasping hands. I'm like, I don't even know sometimes that I'm doing it.
it's comfortable, right?
Ah, I'm like,
And the one thing I can't like the one thing I'm really working on right now is there's like three kind of things I'm thinking about when I'm podcasting. It's like one, my planned questions and like
yeah,
story arc that I want to tell.
yes,
It's two, the active conversation that's happening in front of me, which is really where I should be living the most. And three, it's what is my listener hearing and thinking right now?
yeah,
And so I'm actually like, I'm kind of juggling those three balls in my head right now. And it gets exhausting. I don't know if that's good or bad,
yeah.
but those are the three parallels that are running in my mind during an interview.
When you are researching or getting ready for your podcast guests, what are kind of storytelling techniques are you working on to say, okay, this flows this way or this makes sense to go here, and then carrying that forward to when you go into your episode and making it so you're not feel like you're reading off of a list of questions.
I always tell them it's going to be conversation.
Okay.
And very rarely do I hate sending questions ahead of time. I do it, but I hate it because I just want it to be a conversation.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to be question answer. I think my listener prefers the conversation type. And they're just a lot more fun to listen to. If you listen to Smartless podcast, it's one of the top podcasts in the world because it's a conversation with interesting people. And but I do always call friends and colleagues of my guests
Yeah.
without them knowing and get some inside information on them. And I love that. And I'm really fascinated by people's childhoods.
Okay.
and their upbringings. I recently went to this thing called the Hoffman process,
Okay.
and it was a 7-day retreat. It's been around since the 1960s. People like Andrew Huberman have gone
Yeah.
to it, Scooter Braun, and it dives into your childhood and how it affects who you are today. And I'm just fascinated by that because it shapes a lot of who we are. And so with my podcast guests, I always try to get to the core of their childhood. And then I try to get to their challenges, right? Like what trauma or adversity have they been through? And in the case of my guests, it's usually a lot. And
Yeah.
that really defines who they are. And then I want to end up with what are they doing right now? And lastly, it's what kind of legacy are they trying to leave?
Yep.
you know and the final thing I'll say there is I had the opportunity to hang out with Marcus Luttrell recently. Marcus is the guy that was played in Lone Survivor by Mark Wahlberg. It's
Yep.
a horrible story,
Horrible.
and he's one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. And he says, when you want to get to know somebody, get to the core of what they love,
Yeah.
right? Ask them what excites them. Ask them what they care about. Ask them what they've been up to. And also use your context clues. When a man or woman walks in the room, scan them from head to toe.
I love
They
that.
weren't born that way.
Yeah.
We're a series of manufactured decisions based on the things that we love and care about.
Yeah.
Dive into that.
It's one of my favorite things here to do because I'm like, every single person, I keep using an example, but a sports reporter may be on the same stage together, but no two sports reporters got to the same place that they are today. Someone may have played sports, one of them may have just loved, listening and to the radio when they were growing up, but it's so incredibly important and also fun to hear about what they did as a kid and how they got to be doing what they're doing today because no path is the same. So I love that you call that out.
So true.
I love it.
And it's funny that we all stress about what's going to come next and where's our next meal, where's our next job, where's our biggest sale. It always comes,
Yep.
right? So just enjoy the ride. Don't stress your life away.
I want to get into just what continues to drive your passion for one podcasting, but also this form of storytelling. What kind of fuels your fire?
I think it's an opportunity for generations to come to know who these people are,
Yeah.
what they did, what they stood for, whether it's my great grandkids.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about my great grandparents, nothing.
Interesting.
And if I could listen to a podcast
Yeah.
from them, how cool would that be?
Yep.
And so the fact that my great grandkids someday will have an opportunity to hear about the life and the people that I got to come across
Yeah.
is so exciting to me. And that's a small part of it. A big part is giving these inspiring, humble people the opportunity to finally get what's theirs, right? Get some shine, get some attention, get the opportunity to capture their legacy in a bottle. And there's so many stories, right? I went on an 8-country tour starting in February, Nepal, Brazil, Bhutan, Japan, Hong Kong, all over, capturing these stories.
Yeah.
And I want to keep doing that, right? I'm currently right now trying to put together a trip to Africa in August to go highlight some really incredible people. Also climb Kilimanjaro with my sister, which would be a nice bonus on top.
That's
And I'm just so fired up about it. And it's cool because I highlighted a biotech company early on,
yeah.
and they're going after brain cancer in a really innovative way. It's called Gemini. And a listener heard about them and ended up putting a significant amount of money into the company. And so it's like, it's not just about podcasting, right? It's about advancing these things that are good for society. And
Yeah.
that's what's keeping me going.
I love that. Okay, I want to hear if you actually do Kilimanjaro though, because I'm super excited to hear about that. Um, I want to, we were talking about it earlier. If you have your phone or if you know them off the top of your head, your 5 podcast recommendations right now for people to listen to that you,
Oh,
I'm like, we can pull out our Spotify,
no, I
rip
can
them off.
definitely, yeah, I can do that. Hold on, let me write them down though, real quick. I've got 4. I need to get my 5th. All right, ready?
Yep.
Okay. My favorite 5 podcast shows are Tim Ferriss. That's what
Okay.
initially hooked me on podcasting, specifically the Jamie Foxx episode. I think Jamie Foxx is one of the most entertaining, inspiring people. Then I'd say Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. I
Yes,
love
that's
the
on
range,
mine.
love the range of guests he gets. Smartless, I find to just be very entertaining. The 3 actors,
I
they're
love the
hilarious.
format that they do with that in the sense of like one of them knows who the guest is, but the two are getting like context clues in the beginning. I love how they do that. And then the documentary series that they put out too.
That was fire.
That was funny as hell. And I loved that.
Yeah, that was great. To do that, how I built this with Guy Raz, I just love entrepreneurial journeys, right? Like their struggle, their triumph. I love the arc of that. And he's had some incredible ones. I specifically love the Soul Cycle episode and how they just went for it. They just started, right? That's what it's all about. Like I started my podcast by interviewing a guy on my phone in a hotel lobby during a break. Just start.
Yeah.
And then the last one, I'm really digging Scott Galloway right now, the New York marketing professor, NYU marketing professor, rather. And
Yeah.
so any podcast that he does, I think he's just brilliant.
Have you read Guy Raz's book?
I haven't.
It's
Is it
on-
good?
It is. It's so good. I have like my bookshelf right above me.
What's it about?
It is. It's essentially his podcast in in the book form, but he's really getting into more of how he built his business, the stories that and the people he's talked to. And so I love when people put a book together because I read The Diary of a CEO too, Stephen's book. And I love when you get to dive in a little bit more to guest perspectives and those kind of stories outside of podcast form. Um, so both those two I've actually read, but you named all the ones like those are my pretty much 4 of the 5 I listen to on like a weekly basis. I'm like,
Let's
yeah,
go.
yes, I knew I love the Diary of a CEO, though Stephen Bartlett. I love his podcast.
Yeah, and he's doing this flight studio now, right? So he's going to be kind of an umbrella owner of a bunch of podcasts.
Yeah, he actually talks about that in his book. Uh, so when he made the announcement, I was like, finally. I was like,
Let's
he's
go.
finally doing it. Your detail your travel, or would you like to be in a studio doing all of these episodes, or do you like traveling around and recording in New York City or in wherever it may be? Do you like that method?
Yeah, I'm lucky. I've got studios now in LA, Dallas, and New York that I use. It's where a lot of my guests kind of seem to be, or at least sometimes be. And then when I'm on the road, right now I'm just using a mobile setup that I have. But the vision is to eventually have kind of a production team, hopefully, right, go with me to these villages so I can really capture,
Yeah.
the kindness and the cool things that are happening in these places. I'm doing my best to capture them as a team of one when I'm on the road. But eventually I'd like to kind of build out that production
Yeah.
so I can capture it even more realistically.
I love that you point out Dallas because it's funny that a few other podcast hosts like they've moved all their operations to actually Austin. So I'm like, it's interesting now that more and more people are saying putting up shop in Austin and saying this is where we're getting the most guests and fuel here. I'm like, interesting.
Yeah, Austin's huge, right? You got Chris Williamson and Joe Rogan and all those people are in Austin. It's just for me because one of my first guests, like I mentioned earlier, Jay Adair, businessman, he's so connected there and has given me so many interesting connections. Robert Jordan, the US ambassador to Saudi Arabia during 9/11 being one. Ken Hirsch, the CEO of the Bush Institute, founder of a private equity company that I think he's worth like $800 million now because of it. I was with him a couple weeks ago. So the network in Dallas is good.
It's so great to hear. I'm like, I'll go down and travel. That'd
Little
be that
Tejas, get your cowboy hat and your
pull my
boots.
cowgirl boots out and everything
Yeah.
like that. Eat some I barbecue and all of the good stuff. But it's interesting because how you're doing it is how I'd love to go do it too. I'm like, I'd love to go and find a guest in Florida, in Texas, or wherever it may be, and really be kind of in their home space, do it in their area and kick me out of my comfort zone of a Zoom box or in Raleigh. Like it's super intriguing to me.
Yeah, and you get to capture more of who they are and what they stand for. I almost see it as a journalist. Like I really try to go spend a day with these people. When I interviewed the CEO of Barry's, it's like we went to a Barry's class before. I met a bunch of his colleagues. And so then I just have so much more context when I'm heading into the interview.
I love that. I love that take on it too. That actually reminds me of like a book that I'm reading right now. I'm a big hockey fan.
Hmm.
So a guest that I've had on here, Craig Custance, he wrote this book called Behind the Bench. And he was sitting down with 10 of the some of the most popular and biggest names and hockey coaches, and he did that same perspective. He went and he watched this biggest game in their history, in their coaching history, but he spent time in their homes or wherever they were vacationing for the summer and spent the day with them, met their families, other coaches they coached with, and everything else. Like, this is intriguing because it
That's
puts
so
them,
fun. Yeah, it humanizes them, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know about Empty Netters podcast?
I
It's a
do.
hockey. Do you? Yeah, Chris and Dan run that. They're good friends. I love what they're doing. They're hilarious. The games are intense. Those boys took me to an LA Kings game a couple months ago, and I was like, this is fun. The crowd is so mean.
Oh God, yeah.
Just chirping the whole time, saying the craziest
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. It's better live than it is on TV. I will say I like preach that and stand by that for everybody. I'm like, hockey is better live than watching through a screen, just because you feel there's a sense of energy that comes with it.
Big time.
Andrew, my last question for you is just, what are you most excited about coming up for this year? You're doing all this travel, but what is the one thing that you're really looking forward to going and doing?
It's a good question. We're going to keep doing the same with the podcast, which to me is living my dream literally every single day. Like, I feel like this has been a goal and dream of mine for so long, and it's finally here. So I'm just trying to enjoy every moment of that. What I'm excited to start doing more of, I'll answer it in that way, is I'm getting involved with more medical device startups
Okay.
and helping them grow. And so just like continuing to scratch that entrepreneurial itch while using my experience that I got from Medtronic. And that I'm really excited about.
That's cool. I'm really looking forward to seeing the conversations you have this year and wherever you're jetting off to. I love what you're doing, and I can't wait to listen to more of your episodes as they're coming out.
Oh, well, I was so honored that you reached out to me. So thank you for having me, Danielle. Congrats on your 111 episodes. And let's keep doing the dang thing.
Yes, yes, I'm fueled by it every day. I'm lucky enough that I get to sit in this space and get to talk to people like you and others who are out just kicking ass every single day and taking no prisoners. So I just appreciate you sitting down with me and sharing your story and more what you're doing.
Anytime, Danielle. Thank you.
Yes, yes. You guys, I will have all of Andrew's socials and Permission to Shine podcast down below. Please go give him a follow. But as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.
See you.